Well, it's a look at the week in federal politics, and obviously another week which is dominated, where dominating everything else was Canada's response to the coronavirus. I'm joined now by three MPs from the different parties. Arif Virani is a Liberal MP for the Toronto riding of Parkdale High Park. He's also Parliamentary Secretary to the Prime Minister. Alex Ruff is the Conservative MP for the Ontario riding of Bruce Grey, Owen Sound, and his party's Deputy Whip. And Rachel Blaney is the NDP Whip and the MP for BC, the BC riding of North Island, Powell River. All three of you, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
I want to start, obviously every week we know what dominates the discussion, and this week the pandemic is hitting, and in two provinces we have premiers and health authorities calling it now the second wave. And Rachel Blaney, where you are in BC and Alberta, I think the provinces there are more or less admitting that we're into the second wave. I want to talk about something that came up really big this week, and that was testing. We just heard from the Ontario government. They are now 90,000 cases behind in a backlog. They are now taking appointment-only testing. There are categories of people who are being told not to test, and some people are saying that that's challenging the actual validity of tracing if you're asymptomatic. There are problems. Arif Virani, what more can the federal government be doing to help out the provinces, two of whom are at least having real problems?
So it's a fair comment, and obviously we are sympathetic in hearing the frustration of Canadians that are in lines for tests right around the country. And what we're doing is responding as comprehensively as possible. You know that we put together a safe restart agreement. $4 billion out of the $19 billion for that was dedicated towards contact tracing and testing. You also should know, and your viewers should know, that we've doubled the capacity of staffers at Health Canada who are doing the approvals of rapid testing. But what we will do and what we will continue to do is make sure that it is not politicians or elected officials that make the final call on the best tests, the most appropriate tests, the most accurate tests, but leave that in the hands of scientists and experts in the field. That is the expertise we've relied on since the start of the pandemic, and that's the expertise we will continue to rely upon. Has that caused some frustration? Yes, it has. We're aware of that, but I think this week we had some good steps with not only procuring 7.9 million tests that would be rapid tests from a source in the United States, but also ensuring that those tests have been approved as of about 2 days ago.
Now, one of the senior people from Health Canada told in several interviews on Thursday that the majority of those 7.9 million tests won't be available in Canada until early next year. Could anything more have been done faster?
Yeah, I think there's always things that can be done quicker. I think what we're trying to do is this is very much a dynamic process, much like all of the income supports and business supports that we've rolled out over the past 4 or 6 months. Things can be sped up, and we're trying to speed them up as best as possible, at the same time maintaining that balance. And that balance is empowering Health Canada officials to make decisions rapidly and have the resources to make those decisions, but not making the decisions for them. That's a line that we won't cross, and I don't think Canadians expect us to cross that line, because that's when you jeopardize political considerations influencing what should be a science-based and medical-based decision.
Okay, Alex Ruff, your take on this, on where things are. Obviously the provinces have a lot, in fact, the primary responsibility for things like testing and healthcare, but your take on this for the Conservatives.
Well, I'm very disappointed. You got the Premier of Manitoba coming out within the last hour saying that the federal government's blocking them from procuring those rapid tests that they've just approved. You've already noted the lead scientist that has said these tests aren't going to be available, the majority, until next year. So we need more rapid testing. And I don't disagree with the comment that it shouldn't be politicians making these approvals. But when we have scientists and we have agreements with other countries around the world and our allies, in particular the European Union, our agreement allows to take their scientists and health officials at word for those approved tests. After 6 months, I come from a military background. We need actions, we need decisions, and we need to move rapidly here. This is having a crucial impact, crippling our economy, the recovery. Parents are being stuck at home, trying to wait test results for their children as schools are back up, as we absolutely need. And we need these rapid tests. Sole proprietors, small businesses, with this inability for them to get tested in hour wait times, it's just unacceptable.
Okay, Rachel Blaney, your take on this?
Well, there's no doubt. Canadians across this country are struggling profoundly. We knew that a second wave was coming. I think Canadians have been very clear. They want to see a process in place that is going to secure the best healthcare supports that there can be. We need to see rapid testing. I understand and agree that we shouldn't have politicians making these decisions. I'm certainly not a health professional, and I don't want to take that role. But it is also the government's job to provide the leadership and the resources required. Happy to see that there are more staff at Health Canada going through this process. Just wondering what the delay was. Nobody is surprised by the reality that we have a second wave. We knew it was coming. Preparing for that and making sure that the supports are there so that people are not having to deal with this on the fly is so important. And it is true. Across Canada, there are parents that are at home waiting for test results. They have small children waiting for test results. This is a scary time. We need to get those resources out the door as quickly as possible. And that is something that the federal government does have power over with the resources and how they choose.
Okay, Arif Virani, I want to shift now to the other side of the equation. That is obviously economic aid. And the federal government, everyone agrees, has announced a lot of aid. We had the CERB announcement. The CERB replacement legislation, C4, was passed this week. All three of you stayed up late to pass it. Congratulations. It just passed the Senate. And we also saw the announcement today of the Prime Minister, $600 million, topping up the $960 million in that regional development fund. But the big question still remains, Mr. Virani, the government and rent support. The compensation program for rent. Yeah. Rents are due this month. The program for more than 3.5, 4 weeks, the government's been saying we will replace it, we will announce a successor to it. And again, today we're hearing there will be an announcement eventually. A lot of small business people are waiting for when there will be an announcement of what kind of support for their second largest fixed expense, and that is rent, when that will come. Do you have any idea when it will come and what's the delay?
Well, what I can say to you is that you can take some cues from the throne speech, which talked about assisting small businesses. Some things were very overt and explicit, such as the wage subsidy and expanding the CEBA process. Right. But we also talked about assisting businesses with their fixed costs. One of their fixed costs, as you've accurately put it, is their rent. We are painfully aware of the situation. We are working very, very hard on rectifying the situation. There are some things that remain to be ironed out. Part of this just deals with the basic nature of the Federation and working with our provincial partners, but Minister Freeland is actively working on this. I cannot go into more details other than that, but other than to say that we are actively working on a rent assistance plan, which I'm hoping will also be more targeted and directed at the tenants who are faced with the rent consequences themselves and alleviate some of the burdens and obstacles we faced in the previous iteration of the rental supports.
Okay, I just want to read between the lines. You've said two things. If I read between the lines significantly, one, that the holdup is negotiating with the provinces, and two, that you want to heed the complaints by the sector that it should go to tenants and not to landlords, but that is also being, the rumor is that that's also being held up by the provinces. Can you shed any light on that?
Well, I'm trying to be as clear as I can with respect to you and your viewers, just to indicate that we understand there were obstacles with the previous iteration of the program. We understand the previous program is expiring. We are very keen to see that the small business supports that directly assist small businesses with their rents are delivered. But in order to do that, we need to have a level of cooperation from the provinces, and that's what Minister Freeland is working on very diligently as we speak. Okay,
Alex Ruff, how much of this should we be pressuring maybe provincial governments?
I don't think we should be pressuring the provincial governments. To me, the agreement, that's out there that unless something, a province has reneged or disagreed with sort of the current setup. Yep. The problem is that this rent assistance was a disaster right from the get-go. It's targeting the wrong people. It needs to be going the application process through the tenants, not to the landlords. So the landlords do get paid. It's failed 90% of small businesses. There's so many small business entrepreneurs that have not been able to access this. I can't speak for other MPs across the country, but I can't think of one email or phone call that I've got into my office saying, hey, this has been a great program, thank you for it, but I've got a ton of them that are saying, I can't even get to it. My landlord refuses to accept it. Doesn't want to apply for the program, so it's failing them hugely. And again, the biggest issue I have with any of these announcements, and even with the throne speech, I come, as I mentioned earlier, from a background, set deadlines, set timelines, put a plan on the table, because without that plan, Canadians they don't know what It's all unknown. They don't know what to expect from the government. There's lots of promises, lots of platitudes, no action, and ultimately the best way to hold everybody to account is put a deadline on the table and then work towards it. If something happens that ends up delaying things, that happens. That's life. But in the end, let's work harder and smarter and get this stuff done. It's time for action, not words.
Okay, Rachel Blaney, your last word on this, on the economic aid package, and maybe specifically on the rents.
Well, I'm happy to see some money coming. I know that this has been a big concern for my riding. Rural and remote communities really need the money sent to them. If we're going to have an economic recovery, we need to have our businesses still in our communities. I will express some concern that they're still not addressing the part of smaller businesses that have businesses run through personal accounts. That has still not been addressed, and that's a big gap. As far as the rental assistance, this program, again, has been very flawed. It needs to go to tenants. And I also think it's important that the government understand that there are small businesses that rent space who don't have a large amount of money waiting for them at home, who are going through the same struggle that every other business is going through. So the model really has to be focused on tenants so we get the results, and we don't blame those small businesses like some in my riding that are renting out space, doing their best to accommodate renters right now. That is a reality across this country. So focus it on the people who need it, the small businesses, the tenant. When is that action going to happen? We're still waiting to see.
Arif Virani, I'm just going to ask you the last question, and it can be answered in a few words. We heard Mary Ng, the Minister for Small Businesses. We heard her quoted on this. We heard the Prime Minister quoted on this. We heard Chrystia Freeland quoted on this 3.5 weeks ago, saying any day now. Is there any idea of when this might be announced? As I said, we now are into the October rent period. But
what I can say to you is that we are supporting small businesses with every measure we can put together, and we are diligently working on this particular package with respect to rent assistance. You saw the regional relief recovery package of $600 million additional dollars going to businesses announced today. It's part and parcel of a broad suite of measures that we are using to address the critical needs of small business.
Okay, all three of you, I want to thank you very much. Thanks for taking the time, and good luck in your ridings, and good luck working on this as we all do. We all pull together. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.